Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Burges Watson. You are watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. The United States issues a firm ultimatum to Israel as the humanitarian crisis worsens in the Gaza Strip. Benjamin Netanyahu criticizes President Biden's administration, asserting that Israel, not the US, will determine the response to Iran's recent aggression. And with exactly 3 weeks to go until Election Day in the US, polls suggest it remains a very tight race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, a race that will be decided by 7 swing states. Welcome. The United States has delivered a firm ultimatum to Israel with regard to the worsening humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Senior Biden administration officials have made it clear, address the situation within 30 days or risk potential sanctions on arms shipments. Well, this statement follows Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's earlier comments criticizing President Biden's administration, asserting that Israel will determine its response to Iran's recent aggression, not the United States. Well, this comes as initial shipments of THAAD missiles supplied by the US arrived in Israel. Well, Biden administration officials have urged Israel to exercise restraint towards both Iran and Hezbollah for fears of a wider conflict. Well, Netanyahu's government has been considering action against Iran since it launched approximately 200 missiles into Israeli territory on the 1st of October. Well, as I said, Biden administration officials urging restraint towards both Iran and Hezbollah. Well, Netanyahu's government has been considering action against Iran since those Iranian attacks on Israeli territory on the 1st of January. Well, our correspondent Sarah Coates is in Tel Aviv for us this evening. Sarah, welcome to the programme. Let's begin with the news of that ultimatum that President Biden's administration has issued to Israel. Just tell us a bit more about Washington, what Washington is demanding.
Hello there, Tom. This is really being seen as the strongest worded letter sent by the United States to Israel. It was signed off on by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and also the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. They are citing deep concern over the deteriorating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Now, this letter says that there needs to be urgent and sustained actions by the Israeli government this month to reverse the trajectory. It says that Israel must, starting now and within 30 days, act on a series of concrete measures to boost aid supplies, adding that failure may have implications for US policy. Now, what remains unclear as to if this is not adhered to, what would be withheld. Still no comment from the Israeli government and no word as to whether this will be adhered to. But once again, this is extremely serious and it really does highlight this intense growing situation on the ground inside the Gaza Strip. We are talking about almost 2 million people crammed into the Al-Mawasi refugee camp that is in the southwest of the country. And these people are lacking real basic supplies. There's a lack of food, there's a lack of medicine, and there is a lack of water. And this is also a place that has been targeted by the Israeli military, places for displaced people. So this is certainly, once again, an extremely strong worded letter from the United States, but still no word as to whether it will be adhered from by Israel.
Indeed, so stern words directed at Israel, but at the same time, a show of support from the United States in that a missile shield, which is known as THAAD, is going to be supplied by Washington. Just tell us what's significant about it.
You're right, and it's already started arriving, parts of this THAAD system and also boots on the ground. That is according to the Pentagon. This is an extremely efficient, extremely sophisticated weapons defence system. It is one of the US's best. Now, what it does is that it can intercept missiles from a range of up to 200 kilometres. We are talking about short, medium and also intermediate, both inside and outside the atmosphere. Now, this is mounted on a truck. It's got about 6 or 7 shots on the back of it, and it's operated by a crew of some 100 people. Now, it is extremely significant. What it will do is really add to Israel's multi-layered air defence system. And what we've been seeing over these past few weeks are some real failures from Israel's Iron Dome missile defence system. It's having a lot of trouble actually intercepting things like drones, which fly at a much lower range and fly a lot slower. But this THAAD, that is not meant for things like drones. This is, of course, given that Israel is expected to retaliate to Iran's attack on the 1st of October, which saw these some 200 ballistic missiles shot from Iran into Israel, with Israel vowing a powerful response to Iran. Now, of course, in saying that, Iran has come out to say that there will be no red lines. If its country is attacked, it will retaliate. So this, of course, is why the THAAD system has been deployed. And the Pentagon has said that it will continue to support Israel, saying its support is ironclad. Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sarah, I mean, what more details are we hearing from Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli military about that counterattack? How, when and what Israel might target? Tell us more.
Well, that is really yet to be seen. There have been a number of very high-level meetings held over the last few days within the Israeli security establishment. According to a number of reports, the Israelis have given the Americans assurances that they will not target oil or nuclear facilities, but will rather go after military targets. So this could be something like the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. But in saying that, we do need to remember and think about what we've been seeing and what...
Okay, it looks like our connection there got cut off with our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates. So thank you to Sarah for that update. Let's move to Lebanon now, where the UN Security Council says that its forces will be protected. That's despite the threat of Israeli attacks. Well, UN peacekeepers will remain in their positions in southern Lebanon. Well, for more analysis, I'm joined by the former British ambassador to the UN and the former UK National Security Advisor, Sir Mark Lyall Grant. Sir Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Al Arabiya News. One Israeli minister has, in the last couple of days, called UNIFIL useless. He said that that force had failed to protect Israelis from Hezbollah's attacks. He then went on to say that the UN is a failed organization, and he called on UNIFIL to withdraw from southern Lebanon. What do you make of all of that?
Well, there's a long history of distrust between Israel and the UN, and that has been exacerbated, I think, over the last 12 months of this conflict. I think there's some truth in the Israeli concerns that UNIFIL hasn't achieved its mandate set under Resolution 1701 in 2006, because although it was there to monitor the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon, it was also there to try and help the official Lebanese armed forces to displace the armed militia that were Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And UNIFIL has been unable to do that. But I do think it's unwise of Israel to target UNIFIL and be critical, asking them essentially to leave, to give Israel carte blanche to do what it likes in southern Lebanon, because UNIFIL has a very multinational component. It's about 10,000 troops made up of 50 different countries, many of whom are Israel's supporters. Countries like Spain and Italy and Germany, France. And so I think if there is damage done to UNIFIL, that is not going to help Israel's international image.
Indeed, and just in terms of the legalities of these things, can peacekeepers be withdrawn from a place just based on a unilateral request? In this case, Israel's request saying time for them to leave southern Lebanon. Shouldn't it be the UN Security Council?
Well, absolutely. The mandate is done by the Security Council, but actually we've seen in other fora, in other areas of the world, that host countries can demand effectively the withdrawal of the UN troops. This happened in Mali last year. But of course, the UNIFIL is not deployed in Israel. If it were deployed in Israel, it would be a different thing, and the Israeli government could ask it to leave. But it's not. It's deployed in Lebanon. So unless the Lebanese government asked UNIFIL to withdraw, it's most unlikely that the UN Security Council will agree to withdraw.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that the Lebanese will ask UNIFIL to withdraw for some of the reasons you stated.
Absolutely.
Let's just turn to the United Kingdom, because last month the UK suspended some arms sales to Israel. Do you think the British government has gone far enough? Do you think there could be more measures of this nature?
Well, I think the new Labour government in the UK has sort of tweaked the policy, if you like, towards this conflict in a number of ways. They resumed the funding of UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinian refugees, aid which had been suspended by the previous Conservative government. They've also no longer supporting Israel in contesting the ICJ arrest warrants or possible arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu. And they've also suspended some of the arms sales, as you say. So these are new developments by the government. They've also announced today further sanctions on some of the illegal settler institutions in the West Bank, which is something that the previous government did. So there's a number of steps that the government has taken, but I think we'll see stronger rhetoric and possibly stronger action in the future.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up on something said by the former head of MI6, Alex Younger, who a couple of months ago said that Israel's actions in Gaza have, quote, bordered on the reckless. And I just wondered whether you think there's a concern in the UK that national security could be endangered as a result of perceived inaction or perceived endorsement of Israel's actions from London with regards to the situation in Gaza, the West Bank and Lebanon.
Well, I think at the margins there's a risk of that. I mean, every Saturday afternoon there are demonstrations in London and other British cities, pro-Palestinian demonstrations. So there is a lot of unease about what's happening in the Middle East, and that's something that the government is going to have to keep a close eye on. But I think it's probably more around the illegality of the settlements in the West Bank. It's more about the violations of international humanitarian law that the Israeli Defense Forces are committing in Gaza and possibly also now in Lebanon that will concern the British government, which after all is very committed to multilateralism and the international rule of law. So I think it's those areas that will be more concerning rather than the sort of risk of blowback of extremism or terrorism inside the UK.
I mean, from your perspective, do you think Israel has been operating according to international law?
No, I think there's been a number of violations of international law over the last 12 months, including the impeding of humanitarian aid going to the civilian population in Gaza, the sort of collective punishment that there has been against the civilian population in Gaza. These are clear violations of international law from my experience at the United Nations.
Yeah, I mean, some people using the word genocide. Would you characterize what's been happening in Gaza as a genocide?
No, I don't think that's right. I think one has to be very careful in bandying around words like sort of genocide, which have a very specific meaning. But there is a massive amount of suffering on the civilian population that is being imposed by the Israeli Defense Forces. That is certain. You know, more than 42,000 people killed. Now, some of those, no doubt, are Hamas fighters, but a lot of them are not and are women and children. And so there is a question about proportionality in Israel's response to the terrorist attack on 7th of October last year.
In terms of what happens next with the situation in Lebanon, we're getting some quite mixed signals from Hezbollah. On the one hand, they're talking about ceasefires. On the other hand, they're talking about inflicting more pain on Israel. That's something we've just heard today from them. And what do you read into what their perception is of how things might unfold?
Well, I think what the Israeli government is to separate out their conflict with Hezbollah from the conflict with Hamas in Gaza, because we shouldn't forget that there were 18 years of essentially truce or peace between Israel and southern Lebanon until 7th of October last year, when Hezbollah decided to attack Israel with missiles and drones and rockets in support of what was happening in Gaza. Israel would love to separate out those two issues, and that is something that the former leader Hassan Nasrallah refused to do, and the deputy chief of Hezbollah today said that they were not prepared to do. So I think Hezbollah are going to continue to try and mount attacks against Israel, and therefore Israel is most likely to widen its land offensive in southern Lebanon, as well as keep up a very high intensity of air bombardment at sites, Hezbollah sites all over Lebanon. And I think that will continue for some time to come.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We're out of time. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Sir Mark Lyall Grant, thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Staying with Middle East news, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says that she plans to visit Lebanon this Friday and that her Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani is going to visit Israel and the Palestinian territories next week. Well, Meloni says her government is doing everything it can with regards to the situation in the region. Addressing Parliament, Meloni lambasted Israel for the recent attacks on UN peacekeepers in southern Lebanon.
We demand that the safety of our soldiers be guaranteed, both those involved in the uniform mission of the UN and those engaged in the bilateral Mabel mission, which, along with the rest of the international community, has contributed for years to the stability along the Israeli-Lebanese border. We therefore consider the attitude of the Israeli forces to be completely unjustified, in addition to representing a blatant violation of what was established by United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701.
The funeral was held today for the Iranian general who was killed alongside the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Well, the funeral for General Abbas Nilfarashinin took place in Tehran and was attended by the Iranian president as well as some of the country's top military leaders. Let's get a check of some of the day's other top news stories now. The Russian defense minister says that he has held what were described as substantive talks with top military brass in the Chinese capital. Well, Moscow and Beijing have what they call a no-limits partnership, which seeks to counter US influence in Asia. North Korea is reported to have blown up sections of road and railway track which connected the secretive country to its southern neighbor. The military sources in Seoul say they conducted a counter-fire operation in response. Well, Pyongyang has declared that South Korea is its principal enemy. 4 people have been arrested in Spain on suspicion of orchestrating a sanctions-busting network. Police and customs officials in Barcelona made the arrests after intercepting several tons of chemical products that were bound for Russia. Well, Western countries have imposed sanctions on Russia to prevent it from acquiring equipment and technology for its invasion of Ukraine. The US hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs faces a fresh wave of lawsuits accusing him of sexual assault. These new cases, some of which date back to the 1990s, add to a growing list of legal claims against the star. All of those claims he denies. And a stunning comet lit up the night sky in Russia's Ural Mountains. The display was captured in this video. Well, visible to the naked eye, seeing it is regarded as the chance of a lifetime because this celestial object only enters the inner solar system once every 80,000 years. Just 3 weeks to go until Election Day in the United States. And according to the pollsters, it remains a very tight race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. In fact, some battleground states look like it's going to be a dead heat. Well, Harris is currently on a media blitz and is today campaigning in Detroit. And for his part, Trump has been visiting Chicago and is also holding a rally in Georgia. Well, he's been focusing some of his messaging on the economy and the cost of living.
The Keystone State. Fittingly, it could decide who holds the keys to the White House. On the offensive in Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris.
Donald Trump, I think in our collective opinion, certainly mine, is an unserious man. But the consequences of him ever being president again are brutally serious.
The vice president also hit out at these comments by the former president, in which he railed against immigration and threatened to use the US Army to target his political rivals if he wins next month.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
Harris played that clip out loud at her rally.
You heard his words coming from him. He's talking about the enemy within Pennsylvania. He's talking about the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country.
Donald Trump held his own event in Pennsylvania on Monday, but his town hall discussion with supporters was almost immediately disrupted.
A doctor, please. Doctor. Thank you very much.
A person collapsed in the stands.
When you think, right? These people, first responders. Our first responders are amazing, the way they can do things so beautifully and quickly. Great. We love that man. We love that man.
Minutes later, another medical emergency.
Take your time, doctor.
Trump was able to continue. He promised to end the world's wars before even taking office. He told people to vote on January 5th. Polls close November 5th. There was no mention of the weekend's boat parade led by his daughter-in-law and Republican National Committee co-chair Lara Trump, which was joined by Nazis waving swastikas whilst yelling white power and Heil Trump. As the crowd grew restless, he took just a few questions before, bizarrely, calling time prematurely.
I want this to be a really important evening. And those two people that went down are patriots, and we love them. Yes. And because of them, we ended up with some good music, right? Right? So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Cue half an hour of blasting classic rock ballads, during which he stood dancing, swaying, and walking around on stage. A candidate, an election like no other. Benji Haya, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
OK, well, let's get more on this now with our chief correspondent, Simon Marks, who is in Washington for us. Simon, great to have you with us. Just looking at that report there, lots we could talk about. But let's start by talking about what Kamala Harris has been up to. She's been pretty aggressively challenging Donald Trump, making comments about his health, his mental stability. She's in Detroit today. I just wonder why she's in Detroit and what message she brings with her there.
Well, she's going to Detroit for a couple of different reasons, Tom. I mean, first of all, Detroit, of course, is in Michigan, and it's a must-win battleground state, and she is in difficulty there. And that relates to the lack of willingness of many Arab American voters to get behind her. They oppose the Biden-Harris administration's approach, particularly to the crisis in Gaza, but more broadly to the conflict in the Middle East. And Harris has made several efforts to try and turn that situation around, many of them to very little result. She's also there because she wants to reach out to African-American male voters in Michigan. This after former President Barack Obama last week publicly raised the issue of black men in the United States, many of them saying that they are unwilling to vote for her. And Barack Obama suggested that was because many black American males don't like the idea of a black American woman being in charge in the United States, being in a position of power. So yesterday, the Harris team unveiled a new raft of proposals designed to try and win across support from male voters among the African American community that may not be backing her. And she's going to be making some appearances in Detroit today in a bid to try and advance that and cement that support into place if she can.
OK, and for his part, Donald Trump tapping into what's probably the most important issue on voters' minds, which is the economy. Just tell us a bit about what we've been hearing from him in the last 24 hours.
Well, in the last few minutes, Donald Trump has been sitting for a live interview with Bloomberg News and has said that the most beautiful word in the English language is tariffs. He has pledged to impose tariffs of up to 2,000% on some foreign-made products. He has said to manufacturers that he's putting them on notice that they are going to face very steep tariffs under his administration unless they base their manufacturing in the United States. He said he wanted to make that absolutely clear. He has said that he opposes the proposed takeover of US steel by Nippon Steel of Japan. And he interestingly has refused to confirm whether he had any conversations with Vladimir Putin after he left the presidency. Remember that Bob Woodward, the veteran Washington Post journalist, is claiming that Trump and Putin have spoken on numerous occasions while Trump has been out of power. Trump, in this interview with Bloomberg today, has said that he won't say whether it happened, but he said, if I did, it's a smart thing. So that obviously is going to boost that speculation. But on the economy, it is tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. And in his appearance yesterday in Pennsylvania, before it got interrupted by that music festival that we were reporting just a short while ago, he also promised to zero in on reducing the price of groceries. He says that as he travels the country, the single biggest issue that voters bring to his attention is the soaring price of food in American supermarkets.
Yeah, clearly the economy, cost of living, very important issues for voters. I'm just wondering, what else is at the forefront of voters' minds? And are, for example, events in the Middle East that we've been reporting on extensively here, something that could sway the vote one way or the other?
Well, I mean, they certainly could sway the vote in that battleground state of Michigan. There's no question about that. And we've had news here today from the Biden White House, which says that it is giving the Israelis 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in the region and their response to it, or they may again suspend some weapons shipments from the United States to Israel. That, of course, not just a message that is directed at Israel. It is also a message that the Harris team will be hoping will resonate on the campaign trail and perhaps persuade some wavering voters that the Biden-Harris administration is taking the situation more seriously and working hard to secure votes, particularly among Arab American voters that they have not yet managed to cement in place. But look, foreign policy is clearly not a driving factor in this election, except as far as illegal illegal immigration is concerned. And Donald Trump doesn't speak of illegal immigration as a foreign policy issue. He talks of it fueling a domestic crisis here. But that, coupled with the economy, are two of the major issues here. The Democrats would love to think that the future of American democracy and the need to preserve it was a big issue driving voters to the polls. But that takes a backseat behind the economy, immigration, and also in the minds of grassroots Democrats, the issue of abortion rights in the United States. Those issues really seem to be fueling voters as they prepare to either head to the polls on election day or cast early ballots in person or by mail, which in numerous states now they can already do.
All right, thank you very much indeed to our chief correspondent, Simon Marks. Thanks a lot. Let's get a quick check of some business news stories we're following now. Oil prices have fallen sharply after reports that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told the White House he will not be targeting military sites in Iran instead of oil or nuclear facilities. Well, Brent crude is down more than 4.5% to just below $74 per barrel. Google has made a deal with Kairos Power to use small nuclear reactors to power its AI data centers. Well, the first reactor is expected to be operational within this decade, with additional reactors coming online by the year 2035. Well, the companies haven't disclosed the deal's value or the locations of these plants. The Italian defense company Leonardo and the German arms manufacturer Rheinmetall have announced a joint venture to deploy tanks and military vehicles for the Italian army. The new company, which will be called Leonardo Rheinmetall Military Vehicles, will be based in Italy, with both firms holding equal stakes. Let's get a check of a couple of sports stories for you as well. The former Chelsea manager, Thomas Tuchel, has discussed the possibility of becoming England's next manager. Well, the team has been without a permanent coach since Gareth Southgate resigned after the Euro 2024 final loss to Spain. Well, Lee Carsley is currently serving as interim manager, while the FA considers candidates for the role. And the Manchester United legend Sir Alex Ferguson will step down as the club ambassador at the end of this season. Well, since retiring as manager in 2013, the 82-year-old has served as a global ambassador and club director, regularly attending games and holding a seat in the director's box. Before we leave you, a reminder of our top stories. The United States has issued a firm ultimatum to Israel as the humanitarian crisis worsens in the Gaza Strip. Benjamin Netanyahu criticizes President Biden's administration, asserting that Israel, not the United States, will determine its response to Iran's recent aggression. And with exactly 3 weeks to go until Election Day in the United States, polls suggest it remains a very tight race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, a race that will be decided by approximately 7 swing states. That is all we have time for. Coming up next is Hadley Gamble, and at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, do join Rosanna Lockwood for Global News Today. That's a roundup of top international news with exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. Stay with us.